and I'm an international medical officer with the MSSO. So I, along with my colleague, Nicole Fortunato, will be your instructors today. Nicole, would you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Fortunato, and I'm a clinical associate with the MSSO based in northern New Jersey. Coming to you today from a very sunny, beautiful fall day. I always like to give a little weather update to start our webinars.
Wonderful. Thank you. So in addition to Nicole and myself, we are going to be joined by Hannah Eaton, who's going to help facilitate today's webinar. And in order to be interactive with you, we are going to be using the Poll EV software. The instructions to join, as Hannah mentioned a bit briefly, are in the chat section of your GoToMeeting control panel. Now, throughout the presentation, at various points, both Nicole and I are going to prompt you to log in and join Poll EV so that you can participate in the coding exercises. One additional point I'd like to make is that the Q&A portion of today's session is intended just to answer questions about the various principles that we discussed today. And it's not really intended for general coding questions. We will have a period in the end and an opportunity for you to submit coding questions that you'd like to see in our next Let's Code Together session. So we do take your suggestions and we implement them in subsequent sessions. So today we're also going to be using the web-based browser for exercises, and we have provided a training ID and password for you to use. This is also shared with you in the chat section of the GoToMeeting control panel. As well, just to for you to sort of keep track of time, this session is scheduled for 90 minutes. Now, in the eventuality that we don't cover all of the exercises that we prepared today, we will carry over those exercises for our next session of Let's Code Together in English. Typically, this doesn't usually happen. We typically get to cover all the exercises that we prepare. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before we begin, I always like to give a brief background on MEDRA and the MSSO so that for those of you who are joining for the first time any of our training sessions, you have a general grasp and background on MEDRA. So MEDRA stands for the Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities. MEDRA is an ICH initiative, and the ICH, or the International Council for Harmonization, adopted the development of MEDRA in approximately the mid-1990s. And now, since MEDRA is a living, breathing, and ever-evolving terminology, the ICH appointed the MSSO, or the MEDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization, the task to maintain and further develop the terminology based on users like you, your feedback, as well as we are tasked with a function to provide training like the one you're attending today. In addition, the MSSO also administers the MEDRA licenses. So all of these various MSSO activities are overseen by the ICH's MEDRA Management Committee. The MEDRA Management Committee is composed of various industry and regulatory bodies with oversight with the WHO acting as an observer. Okay, so next slide, please. Now, for those of you who are familiar or have attended our previous presentations, you do know that we are required before all presentations to read the disclaimer notice. So I'll try to do it as painlessly as possible and sort of summarize it. In the first bullet, we basically talk about the fact that MEDRA is owned by the ICH. All of the materials presented today are copyrighted material and owned by the ICH. Now, aside from the logo, all of the material that we present today can be used by you in your organization. However, if you make any changes or modifications, you must acknowledge that you made those changes in a disclaimer and that those changes are in no way supported by the ICH. The second bullet is basically legal language and it must be read as such. The presentation is provided as is without warranty of any kind. In no event shall the ICH or the authors of the original presentation be liable for any claim, damages, or other liability arising from the use of the presentation. And thankfully, the third bullet is not relevant for us today since we're not using any third-party material in the presentation. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now, before we begin, we do encourage you to participate using Poll EV in the various exercises, as well as you can pose questions during the session on the particular exercise that we're showing. If we don't get to your question for some reason during the session, we do have a record of this question and we will respond to you in an email. So your question won't get ignored. Either we'll answer it right then or we'll email you the answer. As well, in any endeavor of this type of training, and in the interest of time, we already agree that we agree to disagree because there's always multiple approaches and possibly several terms that could be correct in various coding exercises. As well, we can't take specific, your own difficult or challenging coding examples during the session. We're only going to discuss principles around the examples that we're discussing in the session. Okay, so next slide, please. So now we come to the interesting part on how to join Poll Everywhere. This is the platform that you're going to use throughout the session today that's going to help you participate in the various coding exercises. So first of all, either using your computer, your iPhone, or a iPad, whatever, you visit www.pollEV.com/NICOLEF. Nicole's been kind enough to let us use her account. So once you go to that URL, you connect. It'll has a space for username, but you don't need to enter any username. I want to remind everyone that all of these activities are anonymous, so don't be shy at all. If you think something is wrong or right. We don't know who's providing any of the answers. Everything is anonymous. Okay, so let's, for those of you who have an iPhone, you just use the camera and show it this QR code and it'll automatically take you to Poll Everywhere. You won't have to log in or anything. Okay, so let's give everyone a few seconds to either use the URL to log into Poll EV or to use the QR code, and we're going to give you a sample question so that we get a feel for how to use this particular platform. So the first question is, once everyone's logged in, where are you located on this map? And as you know, we're a global representation. People are joining us from all over the globe. So Nicole, your geography is better than mine. What do you see the majority?
I see lots of people signing in from Europe right now. Looks like, oh, and the US is catching up, so that's good. And Canada, maybe. Somebody's in the ocean, that's good. Maybe in the Caribbean. Very nice, especially now that the weather's getting colder. We have India, right? We have, it looks like Brazil.
South America, we have someone, I was trying to get to Australia.
Somewhere out by Perth, right? I love Perth. Anyway, maybe that's a mistake, but maybe not. Very nice. Look at this, Sabina. This is and I have to say, always, this is my favorite slide of every presentation to see where we are in the world and how we're all the people from all over are joining in today to listen to our Let's Code Together. Looks like lots and lots of people, so that's good. Guess we can give it
also
another...
we're in various time zones as well. So we're here in the United States Eastern Coast, it's 11 a.m., so a bit before lunch. For others, I think it'll be evening. For others, maybe very early morning. So we'll try to keep this very interesting to keep you all awake.
All right, we'll let this keep going for a little bit longer, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. This is great. We have lots of representation from all over.
Yeah, good to see that people are able to use Poll EV, so that's excellent. So similarly, you'll log in or stay logged in and then answer the various coding exercises as we perform them.
Great. All right, so I'm going to go back to the slides, Mina, so you can carry on.
Okay, so now that we were all successfully able to log into Poll EV, either using your iPhone and the QR code or your computer using the URL we provided, we are going to also be using the Medra browsers. Now there's three options you have for the browser. You can use the Medra desktop browser. For my examples today, we'll be demonstrating on the Medra web-based browser. As well, you can use the mobile browser. Now for the web-based browser, we have provided to you a temporary training password as well as training ID. You can certainly use your own personal one if you have it, but just if you don't have it handy, for your ease, here you on the screen, we have the temporary username as well as the password or the Medra web-based browser. Okay, so I'm going to be demonstrating, like I said, with a web-based browser. And Nicole, if you can show from the Medra website how to also access the web-based browser. If you go on medra.org.
Yep. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, right, you click on WBB. You just click on that and it will take you to the web-based browser, and that's where you can enter the ID and password we provided to you. And then you can just, let's make sure that this is in English so Samina and I can work today. And then you just hit log in and it should take you right to the browser. And this is the one that Samina will be working off of today to show you when she goes through her examples. So just we'll give everyone a couple more minutes just to log in.
Yeah, let's give everyone a good idea. Just a chance to have that up, access the Medra browser, whichever option you want to use. If it's the web-based, here's for you the username and password. Let's give everyone a few seconds to log in so you have that ready when we are ready for the coding exercises.
This and Pull Everywhere are the most important tools for today's webinar.
Correct. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so another thing before we jump into the first exercise, just for us to have an overall overview, it's important to address the challenges that we often encounter in performing medical coding. As you well know, an exact match isn't always possible, right? So you have to have some sort of mental decision tree ready. And of course, as we stated earlier in the presentation, there's always more than one approach. There may be more than one LLT that may be appropriate for a particular given verbatim string. As well, the key is to always keep handy and to refer to the points to consider document, which is a great reference. And as you know, the points to consider document is giving you various options. There's always a preferred option on a particular challenge or scenario, as well as an alternative option. So it's always good to refer to that document. As well, interpretation of data is extremely important. You should always avoid assumptions, right? So whatever verbatim or information you're given in a particular case report, don't omit some of the information that's given. Make sure you take and understand comprehensively all the information and capture that in your coding. As well, don't add information that's not there and assume something is there. So don't omit information as well as don't add information. Make your best approximation and medical judgment when performing coding. So that's something we should keep at the back of our mind before we approach the coding exercises. Okay, so with that said, let's start. Make sure you're logged into Pull EV. Make sure you have your browser handy before we start this first example. So the first example, as you can see at the top in the blue box, if you are given this verbatim in your case report or in your coding work, she had eye itching and dryness of eyelids and had collarettes there. So our mental decision tree is going to, first of all, look at the verbatim and ask ourselves, is this clear enough to code? Perhaps it's very ambiguous. Perhaps I really can't capture or understand what they mean, and I may need to query. What exactly is being reported? And overall, before I approach looking in the browser, I have to have a sense of what exactly area of the body or what type of concept are they referring to. And then I get very granular and think, what is the exact particular LLT term for each of the things that are being reported? And then sometimes you have combination concepts, right? Where you need to have more than one LLT code to represent a concept. So taking our example, number one, she had eye itching and dryness of eyelids and had collarettes there. I see several things listed here. So for our audience, I think we'll go to the next slide and see what they think. In Pull EV, with that particular verbatim, what are the various terms you would use to capture those things? And here at the top, we have that again. She had eye itching, she had dryness of the eyelids, and had it's a weird term, collarettes. So how would I approach this and what would I use to code? So using your browser, please type in poll EV your guesses for what LLTs you would use based on this verbatim. And so once you all respond, we'll begin to see the various answers people are putting in. Okay, so someone said eyelid skin dryness. Someone said eyelash collarette. Someone said eye itching. Okay, someone said eyelid abnormal. Okay. So I see lots of someone said they would query collarettes. So a lot of interesting, good choices, good possible choices. Eye itching. So for the very first one, she had eye itching. I see lots of people did choose eye itching. So that's an exact match. That sounds good. And then they took dryness of eyelids. Some of you only put eye itching. Some of you put all three choices. Someone has eye dryness. Someone has eyelash collarettes. Okay, so let's go to the browser. How would I approach this in the browser? So for the eye itching, that was straightforward, right? So if we do eye itching, do we see that? Let me see, eye itching. And I find an exact match. So that's pretty straightforward. For the second component of the verbatim, it said dryness of eyelids. So Nicole, if I just put in eyelid and see what types of things I have for eyelid, and I'm looking for eyelid dryness because that's what my verbatim said. Okay, so I see abscess of the eyelid, biopsy of the eyelid. Let me try and see if I have something exactly for dryness. And lo and behold, I see eyelid erosion, eyelid disorder. So the eyelid the eyelid is composed of what? Skin, right? It could either be, let me look at skin, eyelid skin. Because actually the eyelid is skin, right? It's composed of skin. And if I do that, and I look down in my search results, I see eyelid skin laxity, eyelid skin dryness. So if you open that up and see which PT it's going to, there you go. The PT is eyelid skin dryness. So this is the best match for our reported verbatim. Okay. Now let's go to the references because I really don't know what a collarette is. Okay. So when I look up, of course, you have numerous references, but just for the purposes of our exercise today, I looked up in my available references to what is collarette. And, you know, it's having to do because it said she had collarettes there and reference to eyelids. So I look up what are collarettes in reference to the context of eyes. And here my reference tells me that collarettes are due to Demodex mites, right? For people who have Demodex blepharitis. And the collarettes themselves are cylindrical waxy debris of mite waste products and eggs. And they're found usually at the base of the eyelashes. Okay, and they're identified during a routine slit lamp. So let me go in my browser and just look up collarette, or at least collar, just to see what I come up with. But it is definitely a valid thing based on my reference. And when in Medra, when I look up collar, I see fractured collarbone, certainly not what my report is saying. Needle separated from collar, no. Then I do see something that says eyelash collarette. And I open that up and see which PT it goes to. It goes to ocular demodicosis. So actually my reported verbatim is eyelash collarette. That is the best term that I would pick for my particular verbatim string. And as Nicole is doing, she'd used the browser, she right-clicked and highlighted the PT to see all the various LLT under PT ocular demodicosis. And she has Demodex blepharitis. And this is what my reference also said. Eyelash collarette is found in Demodex blepharitis. or it's also referred to as such. So this would be my best choice. So if we go to the next slide with our final suggestions. Okay, and so the people who picked eye itching were correct. You would also pick eyelid skin dryness because there's nothing in the browser with just eyelid dryness. And this is very correct because it's the eyelid is skin. And then of course, our newly found term that we just looked up using our references was eyelash collarette. Okay, so good. So this is excellent for the first example. Any questions thus far for the first example?
I am not seeing any questions yet.
Excellent. So this sort of gave you a sort of a path and an example of using your mental decision tree, right? Look at the verbatim, identify what is being reported, and then look for the corresponding best match terms in the browser. And when you don't know or something and you're not familiar with it, you can look up a reference and using your anatomical context in the example, arrive at the correct solution. Okay? So a lot of you had these correct. Very good. So I think everyone's on the right track on how to do their mental decision tree and how to come up with the exact match LLTs. Okay, so we can go to the second example. So here, this one is a little bit different. This is the patient took her medication for stomach pain, but it did not go away. Her concomitant drug for headache also didn't work. Okay, so here it's like somewhat, if you're not familiar with these types of issues related to the effect of the drug, this is a good example to study. Again, this in our mental decision tree, the same questions we're going to ask. Is everything that's reported in the example, is it clear? Is there a need to query? What exactly is being reported? What general anatomical site or what SOC are we typically going to look in? And then, of course, when you code primarily at LLT level, we think about what exact match LLT would go there. Okay, so let's go to the next poll EV. So everyone, please go into poll EV for the second example. And I'd like to see how people think and what are their guesses for the correct match LLTs. So let's get everyone a few seconds to log into poll V in case they got kicked out. Okay, so the verbatim says the patient took her medication for stomach pain. So she took a medication for a particular ailment or symptom, stomach pain, but it did not go away. She took the meds, the issue that she had didn't go away, and then her concomitant drug, which she was taking for headache, also didn't work. Okay, so I see some of you are on the right path. Good. Some people wrote drug ineffective. Okay. Some people wrote stomach pain, lack of effect, and headache. Someone wrote adverse drug reaction. Okay. Typically, we would use adverse drug reaction when we're not sure of exactly what the nature of the reaction is. When it's ambiguous, but we know something happened, so we just write adverse drug reaction. Okay, so let's keep going. Lack of concomitant drug effect. So that's someone's very precise. They're saying that so when the second part of the verbatim string says her concomitant drug, so it's specifying it's a concomitant drug taken for headache didn't work. So this person who wrote lack of concomitant effect is going on the right track. Okay. Good. Another few seconds for people to guess. Someone has stomach pain, so some people wrote the symptoms, the stomach pain and the headache. Okay. Okay. So let's see. All of you are somewhat right. No one is wrong quite here 100%. There are, as we mentioned earlier, there are various approaches that you can take, and more than one answer may be correct. As well, in the points to consider document, as we will see shortly, there is a preferred approach and then there's an alternate approach. And in this example, we can see that lots of people took one preferred approach, others took the alternate approach. So Nicole, let's go to the next slide. So the next slide will show us the PTC document. So exactly what I was saying. So here we go to section 3.23.1, which talks about lack of effect. And this is the basic concept that's being described in this example number 2. And we're looking at how the PTC sort of directs us with a preferred approach as well as an alternate operation on how to capture that. So in their example, they're saying the preferred option is to select only lack of effect term, even if consequences are reported. However, you can select terms for events associated with a lack of effect. So in the example that they gave, they said the patient took a drug for a headache. In our case, it was for stomach ache, and her stomach ache didn't go away. And here they're saying the headache didn't go away. The preferred approach would be to pick LLT, drug ineffective, and some of you did pick that in the poll EV. The alternate approach, as well, some of you did in poll EV, is to do the drug ineffective as well as what didn't go away, the headache, and in our case, it was stomach ache. So both choices, both approaches are correct, with the preferred one being just drug ineffective. Okay, and so this is very important, and I want everyone who's either a new coder or even if you're seasoned coder to make it a habit to sometimes when you're challenged or not quite sure how to pick a term, what's the best approach, always refer to the MEDRA term selection points to consider document, just to clarify and make sure you're on the right path. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so here what we did is I took the preferred approach and I did not code the stomach pain, although if you did, you would still be correct. As well, one of the people in the poll EV picked the very precise term, which was correct. Her concomitant drug for headache also didn't work. So the lack of concomitant drug effect is also an LLT. So excellent job. And this, so the drug ineffective LLT is under PT, drug ineffective, and the lack of concomitant drug effect is a separate PT. So they're these LLTs are in two different PTs, so it's important to capture them both. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here we come to example number 3. When the patient removed the medication bottle. Oh, before I begin, I would like to say this was one of the examples from our previous Let's Code Together presentation. Someone had requested that we address this type of scenario. So as we said before, we do take and incorporate your suggestions into our trainings. So this is an example of such. So in example 3, we have when the patient removed the medication bottle from the carton, the tamper safe seal was missing. She thinks someone was messing with the product. Okay, so we have to really take this section at a time to exactly understand what is being conveyed in the verbatim. And of course, what exactly is being reported? When the patient removed the medication, so she took the medication bottle out of the carton, she saw that the tamper safe seal was missing from the medication bottle. Now she thinks that someone's been messing around with the product. Okay, so let's go to our poll EV and see what our audience thinks. Okay, don't forget remember our first, second or third slide in which we said don't add information, but yet don't subtract what's already being shown to you. Make sure you capture everything that's sort of being conveyed. Okay, so let's see what our audience thinks using poll EV. Okay, so someone said tampering, someone said suspected product tampering, someone said tamper safe seal missing. Okay. Product container deal issue. I think they meant seal. Okay. Product container seal issue. Suspected product tampering. So I'm seeing a lot of you are very careful on seeing what is being reported. So for those of you who said product tampering, the exact second sentence says she thinks someone was messing with the product. So it hasn't been confirmed. She has a suspicion of something happening. So had it said, yes, this thing has been tampered with, then you would use tampering. But she thinks someone was messing. Okay, so everyone's along the right path. Okay. All right, so let's go to our next slide, which shows the browser. Okay, so what I did, and I, instead of live, I just showed you that my first instinct is to say something with the seal, right? Instead of putting more words, let me just see what product seal terms I have. And that's what I put in my search. And I came up with actually exactly what I was looking for. Under the PT product container seal issue, there's the LLT product container seal issue. So Nicole, if we go in the browser and have them actually do that and see all the LLTs under that particular PT of product seal. Okay, let's see. What are things that maybe there's something. So there you go. It automatically came to product container seal issue with the same name PT. But I just still would like to see what are the various LLT, if any, if more than one under that PT. Product container seal issue. I'm going to highlight the PT, right click and go to browser. And then on the left-hand side, that PT will open up and I'll be able to scroll and open it. And it only has the mirror image LLT. So this is the one LLT concept that most closely represents the issue that we have in our report. Okay, so the next slide then goes to another term. Okay, so I wanted to look up tampering because, if I'm not too familiar with Medra, I'll just look up the fact that something was being tampered and see all the choices I have and what would be the best fit for my particular scenario that was reported. So when I put in tamper, I get medication tampering, prescription form tampering, product tampering, and I also get suspected product tampering. So if I if I open up all of those LLTs and see what are the PTs, so I have LLT product tampering and I have LLT suspected product tampering. And I see that each of these are in separate PTs. So I should make sure I choose the correct one because they're separate, different PTs. Since we had already surmised that she thinks, right? So she suspects, I would probably choose suspected product tampering because it's not been confirmed and it's a standalone PT. So let's see what are the other LLTs under that. Again, Nicole highlighted the PT, right-clicked, went to go to browser, and again, we on the left-hand side see that there's only one LLT under that, and that's the best choice that I would pick for this reported scenario. Okay, so if we go back to our slides with the final suggestions. So the final suggestions, and I saw a couple of attendees had exact matches for exactly this, a product container seal issue, as well as a suspected product tampering. And we would not use adverse drug reaction as someone had put in, because that's just a general term when we're not sure what happened, right? Here we have identified and correctly captured very precisely what's been reported in the verbatim string. So I think if there, let's see if there are any questions.
I am not seeing any questions in the chat.
Okay, so I think we can move on, Nicole, to example number 4.
Okay, great. So we'll move on now to example 4. All right, so example 4 is the SSRI, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, was stopped, and shortly after the patient experienced nausea, chills, and fatigue. So what we want to focus on here is this verbatim clear enough to code, right? We also want to focus on what is being reported. We don't really have to worry about the third bullet so much, but we want to see here, what is the most appropriate LLT for this, right? And is this a term that we may need to split? on Clear right now. We're just looking at it from a high perspective. We just received the term. So the first thing I always like to do when I get a term like this, or any term in general that's a little challenging, is I like to say, what do we know? Like, what exactly do we have, like, that we know? So we know the patient experienced nausea. The patient also experienced chills. The patient experienced some fatigue, right? Those are definites that we know happened within this reported term. We also know that the patient stopped taking an SSRI. So those are the four things coming when we decode kind of this term, what we get out of it, right? So now we get to the point where we need to browse. So I gave a couple tips here for maybe what you can try to start browsing with, kind of walk you through kind of what's inside my head, how I do the process. So what I would maybe start by doing, and you have your browser already open from the previous examples, but maybe browse withdraw or withdrew, right? Also maybe try browsing treatment or medication, maybe stop, discontinue, maybe a combination of those terms, right? These are all things that maybe you want to start by browsing just to see what's available in the browser before we decide how we're going to code this term. Another tip I might give is maybe try browsing side effect, right? Or try checking depress. And the reason why I say depress and not depression or stopped, or depress was here because it was for an SSRI, right? So we might want to check maybe depression, see if there's some sort of depression medication type term, anything like that available. And I do depress instead of depression. I can actually pull this up in the browser now and we can go through it. I am using the desktop browser, a little bit different than the web-based browser, just to give you a view, but you can follow along on your web-based browser. And the reason why I said depress is maybe just pull up and see. And depress is a tip because you can do depressed ED or depression ION, right? But I usually truncate the word so that I can get all the possibilities popping up at once, right? And that's a tip you can use any term you're coding. So you maybe just, give it a go and see what you find in here, because we're gonna get to the poll soon where you can enter what you think. So while I'm talking, you can search all these tips that I gave you. So here's depress. Maybe we'll try side effect, right? I said we can type it in and see what pops up. Drug side effect, chemotherapy. All right, maybe not. Maybe because they stopped taking a drug, right? We'll try withdraw or withdrew, just see what pops up. You can look, as you're going through to see what you may want to code, see what types of terms are available in Medra for this drug withdrawal, and then I said, right, we'll try a stop. See if anything pops up. But as you could see here, when you do a term like stop, you're going to get a lot of post-operative terms that pop up. So a lot of noise maybe, right? So that might not be the best route to take. But, continue browsing while I go through until we get to the point where we're going to enter in our, we're there now. So I'm going to pull up the poll everywhere and get this ready for you all. Just give me bear with me 1 second so I can activate it, and we're going to see what everyone thinks. So you can use those tips I just gave you to continue to browse and see what you'll come up with. So how would you code the SSRI was stopped and shortly after the patient experienced nausea, chills, and fatigue? So again, please enter the LLT or maybe potentially LLTs. It may be more that you would use for coding. So let's see what we're getting here. So we have one LLT, and then now we're getting someone saying to query. Okay, query to see if diagnosis of drug withdrawal, if not confirmed diagnosis. All right. We have an antidepressant, very good. See, that's where the depress comes in, right? You can see that maybe in your browser, antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. Okay, let's see here. I'll let everyone work. Be quiet for a minute. Okay, so some people are saying split the LLTs and code them individually and query to see single unifying diagnosis. Okay. Some people are saying we can just, you know, we have all the makings here, right, of maybe a withdrawal syndrome or an antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. Let's see. Antidepressant therapy. Okay, somebody wants to capture that they're actually on an antidepressant therapy. Okay, very interesting. And an adverse drug reaction. More time because I know there was a lot to kind of browse and sort through, so we have time, plenty of time. So hey, I love that we're getting so many responses. This is great. Kind of similar, along the same lines, but slightly different as well. Okay, some people say just quote the nausea, chills, and fatigue, because that's a definite known, right? Okay. Antidepressant. So hopefully those tips for browsing came in handy, and that's something whether you are new to coding or a seasoned veteran with coding, you can use, because it's always best to kind of truncate words and kind of mix and match and see what you can get, combine certain things or do certain things individually. All right, I'm going to keep this poll open. We're getting a lot of antidepressant discontinuation syndrome with the symptoms. Okay. I'm going to keep this open. I'm going to reactivate it so that you can continue to enter kind of your thoughts in here. With that, we're going to, okay, still stuff coming through. Depression is not the verbatim. Okay, that is true. Nowhere in here does it say depression. Serotonin syndrome, very interesting. Okay, all right. Cannot make a diagnosis. Okay, actually, I'm going to let this go a couple more seconds because we're still getting a lot of good feedback here. All right, now it seems to have slowed down, so we will continue on with the slides. Okay, so here I put a slide just to give some potential LLTs, right? So after browsing, after thinking about the term, after going through our tree of thought and all that stuff, what are some potentials, right? So we have maybe a therapy cessation term, the stopped, right? They stopped taking it. The drug was stopped, the therapy was stopped. So could be a potential, right? Also, I saw this pop up a lot, antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. This, yeah, can it be a potential? Sure, certainly, right? It could be something that we consider for this term, just based off of what we have. Now we'll continue on and we'll say, okay, maybe we want to reference, since this is a potential term, maybe I should reference this term to see what it's all about, right? Before I make any hard stop decisions on this term, right? So I put here, I referenced this, you know, I went into the Mayo site and I referenced antidepressant withdrawal. Is there such a thing, right? You can use a site that is credible to your organization. I just happen to use this site today. So it's not something that is a must do. It's just something that is a nice to do. And everyone can use a different reference according to what your organization requires you to use. But see here, I just wanted to say, okay, let's see what this is all about. So if you stop taking antidepressants, you can experience antidepressant withdrawal. So what do withdrawal symptoms mean, right? What are such withdrawal symptoms? That's kind of what we want to look for, right? Symptoms within a day or two. Some symptoms vary from anxiety to headaches to tired, right? We had some of this stuff to nausea. I think that was one of our symptoms that were on there. Flu-like symptoms, including achy muscles and chills. So it's a very broad range of symptoms that can occur when you come off an antidepressant. Also, it's a broad range of symptoms that, kind of can mix and match with other types of disorders and things like that. So, there's lots of information here around it, but just for referencing purposes, just pull up. It's always good, right? You get a term, you say, okay, this may be something we may want to use. Again, just coming from inside my head out to all of you, what we would do here, since we're all coding together, right, globally, is I would just reference that, see what it's about. We see some of the things match what we have in our verbatim. So now my question to all of you is, I have to pull this up, just give me 1 second. I have to switch it over. After referencing and after browsing the term, did your original LLT choice change? Let's see what people think. Will you now have a different response to this? Looks like 70, well, lots, 3/4, we'll say, almost 3/4 of the people are saying that they would change their response. So very, very interesting. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go back to my original question. I'm going to reactivate it, and I'm going to give people a chance to enter kind of their new thoughts around this term. So what do you think now, since almost 3/4 of you say that you would change your response? What are you changing it to? What would be kind of the factor for why you would change your response? Okay, so now people are splitting things out and querying again for the unifying. Okay, these might be the old ones popping up, but hopefully you're able to go in and re-enter new information in there. So while that's going, I'm going to continue on. Okay, so now I came back, and you can continue entering what you would change your response to in Poll Everywhere while I continue on with these slides. So now I'm going back to the original slide, and I'm thinking again about what we should be considering and everything that we found while we're searching and referencing. So one main point that hasn't been discussed yet, and I think a couple people did mention it in their responses that popped up, is the reported term. It does not contain any type of withdrawal or discontinuation syndrome was experienced by the patient, right? So there's nothing here that says that the patient definitely had a discontinuation type syndrome or withdrawal syndrome, right? It just says they stopped the medication, and shortly after they experienced nausea, chills, and fatigue. So now with this being said, maybe your response or your what you choose would change again, right? It does state, however, what is clear and what we mentioned at the beginning is that the drug was stopped, but nothing was confirmed that they had some sort of withdrawal discontinuation syndrome. Okay, so now we'll reference again. So since this is just an excerpt from our points to consider that Samina also showed some excerpts from our document. Very important document, by the way. You could find it on our website. We have many classes around that document if you're interested in learning more. But what we'll do here is I took a screenshot from section 2.10, right? And we want to focus kind of on the bottom here, regarding specifically the paragraph regarding do not add information. In this case, it states in this document, by selecting a term for a diagnosis when only signs and symptoms are reported, right? But this can be translated into our example as well, because we do have some information available, but not all information available, right? So very, very tricky little term we have here. So with everything we discussed and everything we referenced and everything we considered today and all the different changing, 3/4 of the people changed their mind on what we were going to do, what LLTs they were going to go for, how they were going to handle this term, my suggestion would be to query the term for clarification, right? To, in fact, indeed determine if the patient was experiencing some sort of antidepressant serotonin syndrome, antidepressant discontinuation syndrome, and see what the site says. Also, if you don't get a response, you may want to consider, okay, we do have nausea, chills, and fatigue. You can take those and code those individually, right? Because we don't have a diagnosis. And they are individual terms with individual LLTs and PTs that need to be coded. But for now, I would say for this term, I'm going to query it for clarification. I'll take you one step further. So now I queried the term for clarification. After querying the term, a response was received that the patient tested positive for influenza type A. The symptoms were the first sign and not related to stopping a drug or any type of antidepressive discontinuation syndrome, right? So these symptoms that the patient was experiencing are very common to an antidepressant like discontinuation syndrome, but not every patient necessarily experiences symptoms from discontinuing an antidepressive therapy, right? So we want to always keep that in mind. So these are the things we have to think about and kind of the decision tree we have to go through while we're working. So that's why it's so important, no matter where we are in the world, what language we speak, anything, it's always break down the term and really think about it from every perspective and use your referencing, use your colleagues at work, use everything you can to kind of see what you would do here. If this term was not queried, you would not have known that the patient then tested positive for influenza type A, right? We would have just coded it to antidepressive syndrome and we would have been wrong. So, whoops, I went backwards instead of forwards. So my final suggestion here is to go with, you can go with a therapy cessation for the stopping of the drug, right? And then after the query was received, more information came. They appended the reported term with the influenza type A. I would also code the influenza A virus infection, which is available in the Medra browser in Medra as an LLT. So very interesting little path we took to get to the final answers, but hopefully everyone follow along. I'm just going in here now to see if anything changed with this and what we saw. Oh, it's still the older ones popping up, but okay. So with that being said, that takes us to the end of example 4. And I want to ask Hannah, are there any questions around this type of term?
Yes, we've had someone write in and say, since there was no confirmation of the withdrawal symptoms, we cannot assume it's withdrawal symptoms. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. And that's kind of the first part of the decision tree we went through. And at the end of the day, it ended up being not even related to the antidepressant therapy at all. It actually, the patient tested positive for influenza type A. So yes, that is something to always keep in mind, and why we went through and we referenced and we kind of looked in the browser and looked around and kind of use all the different kind of wording and everything we had available in the reported term. So are there any other questions?
Wonderful. Our next question asks, how would you handle if you did not get an answer from the reporter when you queried?
Okay, so if we queried and it came back no further information, unknown, what we do have is what we know, right? It goes back to that first slide, if I can get there pretty easily. Let me see. Sorry, it's going to take a minute because all these. So what we do know is that the patient experienced nausea, chills, and fatigue, right? This is why we go through that tree to begin with at the beginning. We know these things, and we know that they stopped taking an SSRI. So if no further information was available, you stick to what you know, right? I would say query to split out, or if you're in safety, maybe you have other ways that you can split it out, but nausea, chills, and the fatigue, they each would need to be coded individually because we do not have a diagnosis available and we can't make any assumptions here. Also, we do know that the patient stopped taking the SSRI, which we can code, if your company requires that. All depends on your coding conventions, but you can code the cessation of therapy, the therapy discontinuation stoppage, what we had in our potential on this slide here, therapy cessation. So we do know those things, and if no further information becomes available, I would suggest that's the route you take. But again, luckily we did query in this case because information came back different. So any other questions?
Wonderful. Our next question asks, so do you not code at all before the query, or do you initially code and then after the query, you code the follow-up?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. Actually, I'm very happy we received that question because this is kind of let's code together and give you tips. For that, I cannot answer, right? That is an organization-specific decision. I suggest that hopefully your organization, whoever's asking this, has coding conventions in place that are based off the points to consider document. And you can make a convention around how you would like to handle that term. I know some organizations are very adamant. They want to code it while they're waiting for a query to be answered, while other organizations are more lenient in their approach and they say, okay, we'll wait for the query to be answered and then we will code it so we don't run into a situation where we then have to recode or, unsplit a term and things like that. So it's really organization based. And I think, it's a very good point to make sure that you have a convention around that. If you're unclear, please check your coding conventions and check within your organization for more information.
Fantastic. And then our last question for the moment says, even if withdrawal was reported in the term in the first place, then would we have coded it wrong because there was still an unknown influenza infection?
That's also a good point. So for this, if withdrawal was, again, yeah, it could be, right? But then again, maybe if it said withdrawal syndrome, right? They stopped and you have to have the kind of information available that would say like, not only they withdrew from the drug or stopped the drug, but also that they were experiencing a withdrawal syndrome or an antidepressive, discontinuation syndrome. Something to that effect. You can't just make the assumption. So again, if you just had withdrawal instead of stopped, I would say, I would personally submit a query and for more information and just make sure that you get that information around the actual syndrome that the patient is experiencing, a discontinuation syndrome. Any other information? Any other questions? I was going to say information. You want to share? You can start going on your spiel, Hannah.
Wonderful. It looks like you have addressed everything for this example.
Okay, perfect. All right. So that was kind of a long, drawn out kind of example, but just a way to kind of, keep the thoughts moving and the thought process going while you're coding. So you never actually really know, and that's why it's so important to always use the information received within a reported term, right? Don't ever infer, you have to kind of, I always say, especially when I'm doing face-to-face training and things like this, you have to take off your hat and kind of just look at the term, don't worry about your past physician life or nurse life or whatever life, look at the term for what it is and just read the words very carefully, so to see where kind of how you take the term. Okay, so the next term we have here, example 5, is the patient experienced chest pain from anxiety. So again, we go through our little tree. Is it clear? Is it reported? This one seems a lot easier than the last one, right? Still though, we're going to go through and see what we're going to do here. So what's the most appropriate? Do we need to split it? We'll see. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do this time is pull up the browser and give you guys some tips, some tips on how to browse. Okay, so the first thing I would do personally, if this were my term that came in, is I would check chest pain, right? See what we have there, since we know that that's a piece of the verbatim. So we're going to look at chest pain. We have cardiac, we have non-cardiac. Okay, that could be something we keep in our back pocket because it did say anxiety in the term. Again, we don't know. Looking through all the chest terms. Okay, we have pain chest, substernal, unspecified, generalized. Okay, there's quite a few options here. Another thing I would look for is do anxiety, right? That was part of the term. So I would go through and I would say, okay, what do we have here? Anxiety due to a general medical condition. Okay, I see one here that may be of interest. We'll keep scrolling, see what else. Anxiety, illness, anxiety disorder, separation anxiety, etc. So again, exhaust all possibilities while looking at the browser And remember to truncate words, use different wording, etc. So what we'll do is we'll go to our Poll Everywhere and give everyone a chance to kind of put in what their choices are. We have to go one more. Okay, so we'll activate this. Okay, so how would you code patient experienced chest pain from anxiety? Enter again the LLT or the LLTs that you would use. And remember, this says chest pain from anxiety. Okay, so someone would code both. Remember, like Samina showed when we were going through Samina's examples, to open up the browser and check. I'm actually going to pull up chest pain here. So remember to always open up the tree, see what the preferred term is, very important, and also look at, see if what else is available. And you can always right click, go to the browser, and kind of see what other terms fall under chest pain or chest pain non-cardiac, whatever your choice is here. We'll go to chest pain non-cardiac. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're going through. Okay, no chest pain non-cardiac anxiety. We're getting a lot of different. Okay, some people want to do more than one LLT. Okay, we'll give a little more time to see. And remember, definitely search, look at those PTs. Oh, that's interesting. We have an exacerbation term. Okay, very interesting. Non-cardiac, chest discomfort, chest pain. Okay, so while all these responses are coming in, anxiety reaction, very interesting. Okay. We're going to make sure this stays activated so people have a chance. I'm going to go back to my slides really quick. Okay, so now, like I said, we always, you take the term, you kind of go in the browser, you look around, you see what's available, and then also always good to reference everything, right? I always like to reference things just to make sure I'm on the right track. So I referenced here, I just put a screenshot up of heart-related pain, so chest pain versus other chest discomfort. So what are the differences, right? So we have just here some information around it. So triggers, what causes it, sensations, right, accompanies symptoms. So chest pain can be slightly different than a chest discomfort, right? And if we look in MedDRA, we will see here, see chest pain goes to the PT, chest pain, whereas chest discomfort, if we type that in, goes to a PT of chest discomfort. So they are considered different entities in the MedDRA dictionary. So just keep that in mind, right? You might want to just keep it in mind as we go through. So my question now is, after referencing this time, did it make a difference? It might not have, it might. We'll see what happens here, see what people think. After thinking about chest pain versus discomfort, looking in the browser, looking around at the PTs, would your choice change? So. Okay, looks like lots of people are saying it didn't matter. It does not matter in this case. So, all right, looks like it's pretty still now. So in this case, you are correct. It didn't make too much of a difference, but because the patient experienced chest pain, we know here that it says specifically says from anxiety. That means that it's not related to something cardiac in nature. So we go to non-cardiac, right? But in this case, if we go to the browser and we did pull up, say, we went and when we first searched that anxiety, we scroll down, we can see here that there is a term, chest anxiety, feeling of, right? And if we see here, it goes to the PT of chest discomfort, which in this case, even though the verbatim term states pain, it's okay to put it to a discomfort because we're specifically saying what the discomfort is, what the pain discomfort is from, the anxiety. So we do have a close match of chest anxiety feeling of, which goes to the PT of chest discomfort. So Hannah, with that being said, are there any questions around this term?
It does not look like we have any question. Oh, just got one in. They just asked, why would you not code anxiety?
Because in this case, we have the chest anxiety feeling of, which captures both. But again, like Samina said at the very beginning of this presentation, some companies may want to pull out the anxiety. It all depends on what you're looking for, what your organization pinpoints. And so not saying you cannot code the anxiety, just saying this is what I would recommend based off of the term that came in. But if some organizations do have a rule around, okay, we're going to code the chest pain non-cardiac, and then we're also going to code the anxiety, you can do that as well. Or you can code the combination term of the chest anxiety feeling of, because we're actually focusing in on the chest here, the chest pain, the chest discomfort here. Okay, so any other questions?
Someone has asked, is the chest pain not a symptom of the anxiety?
Yes, so that's why we're kind of getting it together. So the chest discomfort captures both, the chest anxiety feeling of. So you're having anxiety feeling in your chest, and that's what you're feeling. So the anxiety is all coming together in the chest area, and that's what we're capturing.
Yeah, and I'd like to chime in. Again, this would be a scenario in which you would use your best medical judgment. So for those of you who feel that anxiety is a separate component and a chest pain is a symptom of such, you would use your medical judgment and code those separately. But again, as Nicole mentioned, it really depends on your coding conventions as well as your own personal medical judgment.
Correct. And this is why we do terms like this, to show you ambiguous kind of terms that don't, not cookie cutter terms where you can just go in the browser, find an exact match and move on with your day, right? These are terms that you actually have to think about. So this is a suggestion that's provided. And if your organization says, okay, we don't like that suggestion, we're not going to go in that direction, we need to split out the chest pain, you most certainly can do that. Again, it comes down to coding conventions and making sure that your coding conventions are detailed, precise, and constantly being looked at up to date. Because if this is something that you would handle this in a different way, make sure you document that, right? And you have it so anybody who kind of gets this term would know, okay, we're going to go to chest pain non-cardiac and we're going to go to anxiety. So, okay, any other questions?
We've had two kind of similar questions come in. They are expressing concern that the PT doesn't capture the anxiety and that anxiety is also a completely different SOC, so that the upper levels are not capturing the anxiety.
Yes, again, you can capture the anxiety. We just went through that, kind of mentioned it. It can be captured. In this case, I chose to go with the chest because we were focusing in on the chest pain, chest discomfort. But you most certainly can also capture that the patient is experiencing anxiety. And we don't know, right? We don't know in this situation. Maybe this is maybe they're taking a medication for anxiety. It's a trial for anxiety medications, and anxiety is already inclusion criteria, right? To get into any trial that this is. So you have to remember, this is for many, not just, one subset of people, this is for everyone. So if this was the case where, that would be, then anxiety wouldn't even be a factor because every single patient in the trial would have anxiety and they would want to go a different route. So just keep these things in mind. Again, it's just an ambiguous term, kind of let you think about, how you would want to handle it, how your organization would want to handle it. Maybe it's something that strikes a thought in your mind that maybe you want to go back to your organization and say, okay, if we get a term like this that's ambiguous, that maybe we want to capture anxiety, maybe we want to capture chest pain non-cardiac, maybe we're okay just saying the chest pain is anxiety, it's like an anxiety feeling of, then we'll go in this route. And maybe it's something that can spark discussion among your coding groups or, different groups in your organization. So just keep that in mind. Any other questions?
Perfect. Nothing else new.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our last example of today, for today, I should say. So we have severe skin detachment and mucosal involvement after using a sulfonamide. So what would you do here? Is this clear? Does it need to be split? What is being reported, right? In this case, I'd say let's break down the term. So again, it's just some tips for browsing. I'll give you, I'll type them as I walk you through them. I would say one good place to start is to kind of do a severe skin, see what pops up. Okay, you could see that there. I would also say do a truncate of mucosal, right? See what pops up there. And you guys can browse through on your own time and your own computers to see what pops up for that term. Is there anything that may fit? Is there something that would lead us in the right direction? Is it something that takes us nowhere and we're still, don't know what to do? I would also say, since we have, it's after using a sulfonamide, I would say, okay, even type in a truncated version of sulfonamide and see what pops up. Allergy, poisoning, things like that. Look around, even maybe do drug or medication, see what comes up. Again, exhaust all possibilities of what you can find in the browser. And next, I would say, we'll break down the term, try referencing information via a validated source as per your company. So this is kind of what we did in example 4. Always use, I would always recommend having a credible list of sources available to everyone in any given organization that your organization defines as credible, right? Have that available. Maybe you can, it's right now, basically everything is electronic. I don't want to say everything because some people still do use books, instead of going on a website and things like that. But I mean, a lot of things are on websites, electronic, all these credible sources. So maybe you can go to one of those credible sources and plug this in, see what happens. You could try Googling it and see if your credible source pops up. We all know, what Google, you want to be a little careful when Googling, what would pop up from an AI perspective and all that stuff. I would stick to a credible source, making sure that it is one that your company recommends. So maybe try doing that. Do a mix of browser, looking up in a credible source. What do we do with this term? So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the next poll. Excuse me. And we're going to activate it and just give it a go. Let's see what everyone thinks. Enter the LLT or LLTs that you would choose. Okay, we're getting some responses now. I know this one's a little more difficult. It takes a little more searching. Okay, very interesting. We're getting skin graft terms and skin reactions, allergy terms, and adverse drug reactions. Here, give a little more time. And now we have some responses coming in. Great. Okay. All right, so in interest of time, I'm gonna keep this open so you could continue. That's interesting, skin fungal disease. Query to see if there's overall diagnosis. If not able to get additional information, okay. Then they gave a suggestion to code. Okay, so I'm gonna keep this open while I continue on, just for the interest of time. So my final suggestion here is, this one's a tricky one. So I would definitely query, I wouldn't choose any LLTs to begin with. I would query to determine a final diagnosis, right? Because if we look and we look at this term in a source, let me just pull up, even if you do a quick search and you go to the NIH and we look at antibiotic-induced severe cutaneous adverse reactions, right? We're not sure here. Could this be an SJS, a 10, an overlap syndrome, anything to that effect? There's many different things that this can say, right? We do know that they did have a severe skin detachment and there was mucosal involvement. And it occurred after they used a sulfonamide, which in certain cases can lead to more severe, say SJS, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, or a 10, right, syndrome, or an overlap, or anything to that effect. Nowhere in here does it say right now in this term that there was an allergy that took place, or a graft, or anything like that. So my final suggestion here would be to query to determine a final diagnosis. And one tip I can give you from my past life of having to query is be very specific when sending a query, especially for a term like this, right? Because right now with this type of term, we could say almost every piece of this term is probably very important to make a final diagnosis, right? It's not something where we take one piece and then another piece and then another piece and say, okay, now we could split these and kind of make a final diagnosis. This is something where it's like the nausea, chills, fatigue. This is something where this whole thing, this whole reported term may be part of the bigger picture for what the actual diagnosis might be. So in this case, I would give a tip for querying and say, just take care when writing the query to state that a final diagnosis is needed, and maybe even give some suggestions like, could this be, in your querying, again, query as per your company conventions, but kind of something to keep in mind, because we're not asking them here to split anything. We're just asking them to provide us more information around what this could potentially be, or if it could be, or if a final diagnosis is available. And again, if your company decides you would prefer to code while you wait for the query, that's something you can decide, and then you can, code it as you should per your coding conventions, and then see if the query comes in and you'll have to change it. Just make sure that you don't split the term apart and do things like that before a diagnosis is made. So with that being said, that was a pretty short one, but do we have any questions around that? But just to show you kind of how these ambiguous terms come in and kind of different ways of handling these types of terms. So are there any questions around that, Hannah?
We did have a follow-up from the user who had asked in example 4 about querying whether you code before you query, or whether you update after the query. And they said that their organization, they are just supposed to follow the MEDRA best practices. So is that referenced in any of our documentation?
Yeah, we don't get specific into querying because that's an organization thing, a specific thing where we make suggestions. And my suggestion to this user is to please go in and read the points to consider document and kind of make it specific to yourself and make sure you have a coding convention around this. It sounds like currently there might not be, or maybe you just don't know if there is. But I would check. So I am not going to recommend to you when you should query, or if you should code before you query, or query before you code. That's something that has to be organization specific. It's not something I can provide. So what Samina and I do here today is we give you tools. We give you kind of things to think about, as ambiguous as they might be at times, right? But we also, give you the tools you need to kind of take back to your organization and then figure out, what you would do, how you would do it. And if there's no convention in place, I would suggest maybe you can get in touch with somebody within your organization, or maybe yourself or the coding team or whoever it is in the organization, and maybe you can get a convention put in place for how you would handle that. And I'd say we're getting some feedback now on how querying is always a good option. But that brings us to the end of our 6 examples today, and almost the end of our time, right? So we made it just in time today. But what Samina and I would like here is we would like some feedback on today's session. Did you enjoy it? What did you like? What would you like to see more of? Do you have any future suggestions for terms that you would maybe want us to look into that maybe we can incorporate in future sessions? Just let us know what your thoughts, and I'm going to leave this open. I'm just going to show you real quick 2 slides we have, just what our websites and our contact information in case you need any of this. You can find it. We showed you how to get to the browsers. We have the help desk if you have any questions. Our website, we went through all of that. Our support documentation, this is where you'll find like your points to consider document and things like that, which you can also find on our website. A link to our YouTube channel, or you can just Google YouTube Medra or MSSO and it will come up. And then before we say thank you, let me pull back up the this and see what we're getting here. Okay, so Samina, any final thoughts for everyone while we're getting our feedback that you would like to chime in and give before we end today's session?
No, I think this last slide is very important for us. As I said before, we do take examples and suggestions in the end that you have, like maybe coding challenges that you don't quite know how to approach. So we incorporate that in our next Let's Code Together. So these are real live examples, real life suggestions that we often incorporate so that it's of most value to you, our audience.
Okay, great. And then lots of people saying here, querying is key. Very nice. Yeah. A lot of times querying can be key, right? So we did have a wide variety of examples today, and lots of different things, kind of some more on the ambiguous side where you can take it different ways, or more, a little more straightforward, medication error type terms, things like that. So with that being said, I want to give everyone a little chance to continue to enter. I'm going to keep this activated. I think even after the session ends, it should stay activated for a few minutes. This poll, because like Samina said, this is very, very, very important to us. We need to know, do you like it? What do you want to see? If you can provide some interesting scenarios that you would like us to go through, we can see if we will incorporate that in the future. We can try. Yeah, and with that being said, I just want to say thank you all very much. I know it's a big ask to take 90 minutes out of your very busy day, and especially if you're here on the East Coast, halfway through your lunch, through afternoon hour, starts to get a little tricky with the getting hungry. But we appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate you sitting with us. Yeah, in Europe it's getting late, and the West Coast it's early. We have all different kinds of time zones here. So we thank you very much. We appreciate you, and we hope to see you again soon at a future face-to-face class, a future webinar, or maybe even a user group meeting. We'll get to meet you and say hello and talk to you. And with that being said, have a great rest of your day, and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.